Welcome to the castle, everybody. This is Nightsaber Z42, and this is week number 1 of my world building challenge. This is kind of in response to the World Bember Day that goes on in December, but I don't really have a whole lot of time to do that in December, so I'm getting started early, and instead of doing a daily video or vlog going over my world building setting, I'm actually going to do it week by week. And that way I have enough time to actually plan things out and really get into the nitty gritty of this unique world that I have in mind, which actually isn't a world, it's a universe. So today's actually going to be fairly simple. I'm just going to explain some of the goals that I have in mind, as well as the actual setting, kind of like a sales pitch, so to speak. So a couple of things. I am going to be uploading a new vlog video every week, and the topics will be a little bit different every week, and we'll try to flesh out some things like the different races, how spellcasting works, and the science and technology of this universe. So the way that I would describe this setting, and originally in my head, I had it basically as Lord of the Rings but in space, and that's kind of where I'm trying to go with. So I don't actually have a term or a name for this setting just yet, but an actual description that I would use is futuristic fantasy. So imagine humans are on Earth and elves are in space. They have their own planet, and dwarves also have their own planet. And it's only recently that humans have actually come to discover the other races in the universe. So think Mass Effect, but on a much more fantasy level. Mass Effect is very science heavy, even with its biotic powers, which I would kind of take to be as psionic powers and the magic of that universe. So this would be basically Dragon Age meets Mass Effect. So there we go. I haven't really seen anything like this before. I mean, yeah, there's Shadowrun, but that's more cyberpunk and fantasy, and they do their own thing, which is really cool, but not in a space opera type setting. There's also Stars Without Numbers, which kind of has some sort of magic in there, and we'll actually talk about systems here in a little bit, but I haven't really read anything that fully blends fantasy, Tolkien-esque fantasy with science fiction, having that technology with high fantasy. So that's what I'm going to try to attempt to do with this world building challenge that I've constructed for myself. One of the things that I'm really foreseeing as a huge roadblock, because this is something that I'm going to want to play. This is basically tabletop RPG. So one of the things I'm really starting to think about is what type of a system am I going to use? And the type of system that I use would heavily influence, things like magic and psionics. In a way, they're still going to be there, but it's just the game mechanics would be a little bit different. So really, the revival of this idea after 5 years of thinking about it came through me reading Old School Essentials, which is a book that basically goes back to the basic rules of Dungeons & Dragons from way back in the 1970s. And so I was actually reading this book and all of the rules in it, and then I started thinking, why hasn't this been done in a science fiction world or in a science fiction universe? It has, in a way. So really, one of the things that I wanted to do, or one of the systems that I would attempt to utilize this for, is something like Old School Essentials, but then reworking things so that I have classes and races, but with a science fiction flavor. So that would actually require quite a bit of work, but it can be done, especially with the B/X class builder, which I've read through, and it's actually really interesting. So this is one system that I might attempt to go ahead and write for. Another obvious one, fairly easy, would be Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Especially with Esper Genesis, which is the science fiction universe that a third party has created for 5e. It would be really easy to kind of flesh out the whole universe. I mean, you already have your standard fantasy races in Player's Handbook, but then with Esper Genesis, you get all of the technology. The only thing that's missing with Esper Genesis is that high magic flavor. They really attempted to utilize a lot of science with their quote unquote magic system, which I really didn't care for. But with the Dungeons and Dragons, you would just keep all of the spells in there, and then you would just use the Espergenesis for all the technology stuff like engineering and hacking and stuff like that. So this would be actually really quite simple to do, and especially with implementing unique races to my science fiction universe, which I have some experience in creating races for. So this would actually be the easiest option. Another option that I've actually considered is Stars Without Number, which is an OSR science fiction rule set, I guess. It's not really so much of a setting as it is a rule set. Now, the only problem that I have with this is its actual implementation of races and different alien races. I don't really like how they set it up. But this would be the closest that I would get to for OSR that blends 5e a little bit, because they do have skills in Stars Without Numbers. In the Old School Essential, skills are quite different. They're basically dumbed down to the Thief class. Basically detecting traps and listening through doors and stuff like that. So I would probably rework some of those skills in that basic game to be more science fiction flavor. So those are the 3 current rule sets that I'm thinking about, but I'm not going to really get into it until much later in this process. I want to flesh out the universe first before I actually dive into settings or systems settings and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I'm at in this whole process for week 1. Just kind of really starting to get a lot of resources to put together. I know that there's a 30-day world building challenge, and I've taken a look at that, both with World Anvil and I can't remember who did it, but it happens every year. And I've taken a look at that calendar, and the problem that I have with those are that they're really more fantasy based. They lean more towards fantasy. There really isn't a good science fiction option, at least not one that I've come up with. So I'm really flying blind here. So if you really want to help out, feel free to leave a comment down below. Any resources or even any literature materials or system settings that you might have that'll help me out. Things like Spelljammer or Shadowrun, Cyberpunk, anything that is basically fantasy but in space, that would really help me out and get some ideas rolling. I do have some ideas, and I do have topics for the next series of videos. I have them all written down, and I'm actually going to start fleshing those out. Next week, I will actually be detailing some of the races that I have in mind without going too much in depth. I'll save that for future videos, but that's kind of all that I have for now for this first week. So feel free to leave a comment. Remember, any types of inspiration or literature that you might know, or even just advice in general, would really help me out. So leave that comment down below. Give this video a huge thumbs up to support this series, and subscribe if you would like to see more content. I do reviews and all of that stuff. And I will see you guys in the next video.